Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Mama Saga. And this is a place where this Marvel loving mama loves to be a wife and mother and attorney by day, but then by night, or in this case, super early morning when I'm doing a live reaction, I get into stuff that's Marvel comic books, Disney Plus, that sort of thing. That tends to be what we do on this channel. I do have some people in my community that want to see me start to review the Rings of Power. Okay, we'll do that too. But right now, this is about She-Hulk episode 6. This is my first view through, taking notes as I go, walkthrough of what my reactions, any Easter eggs, any plot threads that I see moving forward, which there are some. This is what I'm doing. But as it says down below, both live and on the replay, I should say this, spoiler alert, there's spoilers galore. So if you have not seen all of the episodes of She-Hulk Attorney at Law yet, circle back. You're welcome to join us later. Leave any questions or comments, anything like that down below. Yes, I am a real live attorney. I will shoot things through the lens of an attorney. This episode, not so much, a little bit, but in previous episodes, we've been able to go through different types or flavors of law or legal proceedings, and I've been able to really give you the breakdown of like how realistic a lot of this stuff is. And the attention to detail, I have to say, as an attorney practicing since 1998, I mean, I'm admitted in New York. She's admitted apparently in California. It's very impressive. So if you've missed any of my live stream / replay reactions to the first 5 episodes of She-Hulk Attorney at Law, and you're like really curious about what an attorney can bring to the table on such things, you definitely want to check those out. Hey, Rami, what's going on? Hey, Mama, what's going on? So let me just, I didn't actually publish the comment. Let me do that. Okay. And I've also, so the comment I'm publishing is, again, spoilers galore. Rami knows, but I just want to make sure for anyone else. And I also have a She-Hulk playlist that, again, from an attorney's perspective, especially during those first 5 episodes that I reviewed, if you want to see what a real live attorney thinks of this sort of stuff, the playlist for She-Hulk I have linked in the show notes down below. Okay, so this one we don't have too much legal stuff going on, although Mallory and Nikki are handling something that's a little interesting. I like how every episode they're trying to sprinkle in a different flavor of legal ice cream, so it's fun. What did you think of the episode, Rami? Because I know that typically when you come on, you've seen it already at least once. This is my first view through or walkthrough. I'll see if I can snag any extra Easter eggs. I did see a little bit. So here, Jen's a bridemaid in a friend's wedding. This person really didn't come off as a friend. And it is a stressful event for a lot of women, especially if they're single, getting older, and they want to couple up, even if they don't want to get married and they're not coupled up, whether they're in a bridal party or not. It can be like an emotionally complex thing for a woman to deal with. And if you're a man or non-binary or whatever, and you're like, whatever, I get it. But like this audience for this particular Shiro, if you will, typically trans female / identifies as female. So, they are definitely speaking to people in real life yes, it's a comedy, but in a very tongue-in-cheek yet accurate way. Rami says, it was interesting for sure, and I'm excited to hear your take on the legal stuff. Yes, and we will get there because Mr. Immortal was just priceless. I don't do divorce, family court too much, but through the years I've done a little. So I will definitely tell you the settlement and how they went about it was actually very clever. And Nikki was a lifesaver. And I do think that there's a plot hole or a plot loop. I shouldn't say plot hole, but a plot loop that was opened up that I wonder if we're going to revisit in other episodes. And if we do, number one, I'm not surprised in terms of the dynamics that are developing between Mallory and Nikki. Not just on a friendly level, Mallory tends to keep things professional. She's a good human being, but she tends to keep things professional. And in fact, at one point towards the end of the episode, and we'll get there in a little bit, when Nikki tries to do some idle chit chat, Mallory does some because she's not a total ice queen. But as she starts to reveal more and more about herself and her life, there is a limit to what she will get into with Nikki. And I'll let you know when we get towards the end my thoughts on how actually Mallory is being smart in terms of letting there be a bit of a bright line about what she will and won't get into. So Rami says the whole Mr. Immortal part is something. I was wondering in all of the trailers that I saw up till now, about the character landing on the security car, and like, what was that? Is he a bad guy? Is he a good guy? Was there a fight up at GLK&H and he was flying out the window? Who is he? And it's interesting how that actually played out. It's good to see the payoff from a piece that got put into or peppered into a couple of the trailers. So let's see. And then, of course, the whole emotional and intellectual like struggles that a lot of women have when they're invited to a wedding and they're invited to be in the wedding party. In this case, it's also got that overlay of the whole superhero She-Hulk thing, which of course comes into play later. So when we open up the very first scene, Jen is staring at like a floraled up, bedazzled box with her name on it. And when she opens it, all this confetti like sprays out. It's really messy and gaudy. But I have seen invitations go out to be bridesmaids that are either pretty much exactly like that, or it's a good callback to what a lot of women will see when they're invited into something like this. So if you're a man, or however you identify, and you see this and you're like, is this kind of way over the top? Not really. So inside, it's got like a whole bunch of stuff in there. On my first view, the only thing I caught besides the invitation proper to become a bridesmaid is there's some sort of, and I have to look to see if it's a book or something, but there's something underneath that says Bride Tribe going on. And so when Jennifer opens up the invitation, there's a ridiculous amount of confetti that spills out. And I don't normally see like that much crazy anytime I've been invited to be in somebody's, bridal party. And yeah, I'm married. Let me tell you, I just took people out and asked them in person. But then again, as Jennifer says later, she and Lulu, the bride, they knew each other when they were younger. They didn't stay in touch as much through the years. It's common for a lot of us. And so they're not really that close anymore. And it seems like Jen was packing up luggage to travel. So, again, on my first viewing, I can't remember if she said she was going to a particular destination that wasn't LA, but obviously she had to travel for this. So they're definitely not close. And so maybe Lulu, to give her a little bit of credit, couldn't take Jen out for like, lunch or dinner or something and ask her in person. I don't know. I'm old fashioned. I think you should ask someone in person for something like this. So Nikki's helping her pack because they're best friends. They're not just coworkers. And she begs Jen not to take a Luke business suit to the wedding, but to take her super suit. Now, all these things are in black bags. If you saw last episode, Luke was the designer and the costumer to all like the superheroes in and around the area. He did remind me of that little chick that did the design work in the Incredibles. I thought they drew a really great parallel between those two movies and the designer, and like, what kind of superheroing do you do? Do you need to be like invulnerable to flames? Do you need weapons built into your suits? Here everything's in black bags. We don't really see much up until now of what Luke has created for her. One of the suits we're pretty sure is going to be the comic book accurate superhero, costume that She-Hulk will wear a lot of the time. When she was with the Fantastic Four, she ended up donning their outfit, but that's only fair. That's their team. Rami says, Edna mode. Yes, exactly. Oh my God, he channeled Edna. So I'm glad thank God you remembered her name. I still didn't remember her name. That was something I meant to look up and I didn't. Bad me, but Rami to the rescue, and I appreciate that. Okay. So she says, I'm not going to wear my super suit to the wedding. I'm not going to, surprise, wear like a boring, lawyer suit that he created. He did create something extra. So she does give us a little peek with the navy blue and white polka dot number that you might have seen in some of the trailers. So we're like, ooh, she's going to put that on. So, Nikki does approve of this. She refers to her as Shulky, which is a nickname that she had in the traditional Marvel comic book saga. If I'm not mistaken, this is the first time in the MCU that She-Hulk is referred to as Shulky. And later on, they have a verb shulking, which again, I don't think anybody had used in the MCU up until now, but I've seen in comic books from the comic book saga, because She-Hulk was always my favorite Avenger, female Marvel comic book character. I love Miss Marvel a lot. Don't get me wrong, I really do. But, I'm a female attorney, so obviously I identify with She-Hulk a lot, and I always have. So let's see. Nikki says, why is someone having a wedding on a Thursday? And I mean, yes, it's not like the traditional days of yore where people got married late spring through all of summer. People get married every season of the year. People get married on holidays. People will get married on weekdays. It used to be like weddings were really a Saturday thing. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday is pretty common. Thursday, you're kind of pushing the envelope with that. And it kind of feels like a bridezilla thing to do, which makes it funny because, a Thursday, dang, I can't even get off work for a Friday for like a 3-day weekend or something. I have to now take Thursday and Friday and then probably occupy a lot of the weekend too. Wow, this woman is very all about herself, which clearly she is, because they're going to play on that trope. If you're going to have a self-contained wedding episode, like this kind of is, but there are definitely plot threads moving forward towards late and to the end of the episode. There's no post-credit or stinger scene, which again surprises me, because when they first discussed this, they said that there was going to be one for every episode. When they skipped one last time, I was like, oh, well, I know that they're changing certain things up. The Marvels was rewritten quite a bit, quite extensively. And I know that Adam Coogler for Wakanda Forever said that even now, they're still shooting scenes and re-editing scenes for Wakanda Forever. And that's coming out in a matter of weeks from now while this is being shot live. So maybe certain things had to be changed so that certain post-credit scenes had to fall down, because She-Hulk, as you know, if you know the comic book saga, the traditional comic book saga, She-Hulk factors in very heavily into Marvel. Yes, she had her own self-contained runs. The Dan Slott run is the best, if you ask me. She was with the Fantastic Four. She showed up in a lot of other publications for short periods of time or slightly longer throughout the whole Marvel comic book scene. So, now that she's here, it wouldn't surprise me that she would factor into other things. But now they've axed 2 post-credit scenes. I don't think that has anything to do with the She-Hulk end of things. I think they're rescripting, rewriting, and re-editing certain other things that might tweak her out of it, or tweak whatever she's calling to in those post-credit scenes that got axed out. So that's my thought. You can leave your theories about where the last 2 post-credit scenes have gone in the comments down below. I'm curious to see what anybody thinks. So Lulu, another obnoxious bride thing, she's known as Lulu, is an old friend of the family. And actually, of course, Chet, who's been a running, gag line, is going to be the DJ. He's a manager at Best Buy. He's selling, She-Hulk merchandise out of the back of his truck, such an entrepreneur. And yes, in his spare time, he's now a DJ. And of course, it's as gaudy and hysterical as you think it's going to be, right? So, it's not unusual for people to be invited into a bridal party, even though things have gone cold between the folks. Nikki asks the question that some audience members might be asking: if you're not really close to this woman, why are you being invited into her bridal party? And why did you say yes? And it's actually a very fair social convention, especially if you're male watching this and you're like clueless about this sort of thing. When you get invited into somebody's bridal party, you can decline and say no, but that's usually considered like a very, very uncomfortable thing to do. So Jen's like, well, we used to hang and everything, so I'm going to be in the bridal party. I felt obligated to say yes, she says, because how do you say no to being a bridesmaid? And that's kind of double true. And she even acknowledges that since they used to be friends from back in the day, Lulu probably felt obligated to ask her. That can happen too. I will say how Lulu pulled her into this and the things she wanted her to do throughout the wedding also is very clear about two separate things. One, clearly the trail went cold enough that Lulu invited her in, but they didn't care about how she felt when she started delegating all sorts of ridiculous stuff to her. And number two, it just shows you how Jen has shown up in the past in her personal life, because her family really Morris, her dad, is really very much on her side, but like other family members, putting Chet aside, and I don't say that lightly, don't seem to value her as a person either. And if she's useful for anything, it's as a foil to make themselves feel better. Like Chet saying, well, you're a lawyer, both back in episode 1, but I'm a manager of Best Buy. And his dad and his dad's girlfriend are like crowing him up and glowing him up at Jennifer's expense. Jennifer, just Jen, because this episode is called Just Jen, that's kind of what she's been good for in a personal way. And professionally, she's getting way more power and authority at GLK and H. And I have gone through in the past, again, check out past live stream reactions for this. If you don't work in the legal field, you think her partner's kind of sometimes cold or condescending to her. He's really not. And he's more supportive of her than you might think. This is just some of the corporate culture and how it shows up. And they're really being very accurate in terms of how they show this stuff. So in her first fourth wall break, Jennifer says, if you think this is happening at an inconvenient time in the season, you're right. Okay. Because that's how weddings always are. Triple true. Okay. If you're not the bride or groom, this is how people who are invited, let alone invited into your wedding party, feel. This stuff can crop up at a very inconvenient time and really drag down your free time. But you go because of obligation, right? So they're kind of making that point, but I also think they're building up more stuff in this episode than you think. It starts to show up in the wash more towards the end of the episode. But then she concludes very sunnily, but I'm going to look great, so let's go. So then you see in the next scene, she's strutting up to meet the rest of the bridal party at whatever kind of rehearsal brunch or thing that they're doing. And so they're all dressed in like Sunday best street clothes. It's not the wedding reception yet. They're not in their bridal dresses. And you can see the look on everyone's face as they take her in as she's strutting and strolling, because she shows up as She-Hulk and she's wearing the navy and white polka dot number. She does look sharp. It's a nice looking dress, even when she shrinks down to Jen later. But you can see there's the confident like hair toss. Her shoulders are back. Her chest is open. The body language, even if you don't look at her face, it makes it very clear that as much as Jen likes to act like She-Hulk is just dirt on her shoulder, she goes into that mode and it's convenient for her even socially. And she needs to be more self-aware of that, I think. Rami says, being a successful woman sadly invites hate from some men and jealousy or envy from some women. And it actually sucks to see a superhero going through this very real reaction. That is very true for us as the audience member. It's true for Jen as part of her character arc throughout this first season of She-Hulk. Because again, as we've discussed previously, some people with the initial episode was like, this episode feels a little flat to me. She doesn't have this huge struggle with her powers or fear and loathing because she's a Hulk. But as we've said before, her cousin Bruce and their very interconnected families from the dialogue in that episode and moving forward. Morris says it later, I think, in episode 2. We've been through this before. We know what this looks like. We know how to deal with it. That's telling the audience that's not the struggle. That's not the hero's journey that Jen goes on in this first season of She-Hulk, because they said they are open to doing a second season. It's just that it wasn't confirmed in advance like it was for Loki. Loki, they said off the jump it was going to be at least 2 to 3 seasons. And Loki did so well in season 1. And He Who Remains Aside. It was a very powerful character arc for him, and it was a really good story. Rami says her story so far has been closer to reality than others. That's true too. So you do have some people who are comic book fans who appreciate the struggle that she goes through, because in the more traditional comic book Saga, she did have personal and professional struggles both. And a lot of people who are watching the series who can like chill out that everything isn't fight, fight, fight physically, although we get a little bit of that going on here too. And I love how they layer in the complexities for that, but we'll get there. Um, you know, this is a very, some people might be like, this is too much like reality. I want my fantasy. But I think a lot of more nuanced viewers like Rami would sit there and look and say, you know what? This really resonates with me more as a person, no matter who I am biologically or how I identify. I'm just sitting there going, this really is hitting home for me, which actually makes for more compelling viewing, because you want to see how the reality part of it plays out as we have the fantastic overlay of superhero life. I really think they're doing very nuanced, complex storytelling here. So you can see that she's cashing in at a very critical time for herself, because she's coming here with no relationship. She just recently had to humiliate herself at a trial and, have these 4 non-party witnesses be like, Jen, no, She-Hulk, yes. And even then, they were still like flicking She-Hulk to some degree, every single one of them. But at least she came off better as She-Hulk. At least she felt more confident as She-Hulk and was better received as She-Hulk as opposed to Jen. So if she's going to show up at this thing off the jump, she's going to have some thunder so she can get through it. So of course, even though she acts like I'm just Jen, she went into She-Hulk mode pretty darn quickly. And you could see the reactions on the men and the women's face until you get to Lulu. They're all, and, some people are saying she looks fantastic. She looks fantastic in that dress. But of course, the bride to be is super pissed because now she's being upstaged by She-Hulk. Taking out the superhero thing, if somebody shows up looking incredible at an event, the person who might be the center of the event, if that's not them, they're automatically, male or female, they're getting pissed going, but this is my thing. This is my day. This is my celebration. I'm the one getting the award. I dress nice for it. And everyone's going gaga because somebody looks svelte, lost weight, whatever. The outfit looks great. It's a human nature thing. So I think that was well played, bride or not. They make sure that you see that her eye is twitching so that you don't miss the nuance that she's pissed. And then, in fact, the bride pulls her aside and just comes out and says it. You're upstaging me, and this is my wedding week, So Jen doesn't want to be a jerk, and she agrees to Lulu's specific request not to be anything other than just Jen for the wedding on Thursday and whatever. And so there's a fourth wall break. And so Jen admits, yeah, obviously this is like the one time I didn't want to be just Jen. And then, of course, life's making me just be just Jen. And then, of course, then you have the logo show up, and it's not She-Hulk attorney at law. It's just Jen attorney at law in the branding, which I thought was funny. So then Jen asks, listen, everybody else very clearly is coupled up, and it's just me, and I came by myself. And it becomes apparent later she wasn't given a +1 either. So she wasn't even given a choice to bring Nikki or a new date or something like that. So everybody in the party, including the bride, is like, oh, no, you're going to be walking the aisle with Jonathan, and Jonathan's great. So don't worry about it. You'll meet Jonathan later. He's the best. And so you're like, does Jonathan have like 3 eyes? Like, what's going on? It's even better than that. And it's actually a little bit more real life than that, which is funny. So then we have another scene change. Now we're getting into the legal thing for today, or for this episode. So we're at GLK&H. Mallory and Nikki are working on something together. And you have somebody, I believe he identifies himself as Craig Hollis, but then he goes, yes, my name is that, but I go by Mr. Immortal mostly. Nikki's sitting there taking notes. And he goes, I know this isn't your typical divorce case, he knows he has to do a settlement, He does not get into the specifics yet. As they slowly unveil the whole complexity of this is funny, because I'm like, is this going to be a class action? Because that's an even different type of legal thing, if you will. And they've been giving us a little bit of everything that lawyers can do overall along the way. So now we have like family law / divorce, but at the rate Mr. Immortal was going at coupling up and or getting married, it could be a class action. A class action can be like 20 aggrieved parties, 20 plaintiffs or claimants or more. But he doesn't have 20, he has 8. So he's concerned that since he has to settle out with so many people, as we learn along the way, it's not just one ex-spouse or whatever, he's concerned that the settlement might bleed him dry. This is a common concern that a lot of people have, whether they're men or women or however they identify, and they're getting out of, a coupledom or a marriage. Hey, Victor, what's going on? Hello. Rami says, is there a comic book equivalent of Mr. Immortal? That's a really good question, Rami. And that's something that on my first view through, I kept trying to call him Immortus, and I'm like, no, and I don't think, they're interchangeable. That's something that once I'm done with this live stream reaction, I do have to go back and research that. There's one or two other things that I think I want to investigate too that might warrant their own videos. Because I'm a lawyer in real life by day, sometimes I can get a lot of content out on this channel, and sometimes it's a little more sparse. But there are some videos that I know I owe, and I'd still want to do. And I might have something on him. There's also an Easter egg that talked about 2 physical locations that show up much later on in the episode, and I want to look at those too. Victor says, She-Hulk post-credit. I know, this is the second time they didn't have a stinger scene or a post-credit scene. When they originally were talking about the series before the first episode dropped, they said it was going to be 9 episodes, and we were going to have 9 post-credit scenes. So you showed up a little bit into this, Victor. I will tell you that the first time they skipped it, I was like, oh, maybe that tied into Wakanda Forever, because Adam Coogler is still I don't know if they're reshooting scenes now. He said he's re-editing things. He's still tweaking like the story and what we see and what we know now. And the thing's going to show up in theaters early November unless they push it back. So I was like, maybe the first post-credit scene that got dropped last week had to do with that. But now this is the second time that they're doing it. So I'm wondering what they're reshuffling around, that they just couldn't shoot a new post-credit scene for She-Hulk at this point. I'm wondering also if later on down the line they just don't tack on new post-credit scenes for that as they go. They said they're going to continue to be glowing up the CGI on her even after each episode drops. They do make changes to stuff on Disney Plus. They did that with WandaVision, like the last episode of WandaVision, that post-credit scene, they glowed up some of the stuff that was going on as we were getting to and into the cabin that I picked up on, and even I want to say New Rockstars, Eric Voss picked up on, and he made a big deal about it. I'm like, that's right, they did tweet that. Ooh, and on Loki as well, they did that. On the first episode, they added some more stuff in on the first episode when he crashed into the desert. And I was like, that's interesting that they felt they needed to add a little bit more to clarify what was going on in that scene. So Disney Plus and the Marvel movies, like with Avengers Endgame, they were still glowing up a lot of the CGI that they did for that big, final fight scene from what started the first viewing in the movies. And then if you went back a couple weeks later, you were like, wait, they glowed up even more. So I'm wondering why they've now cut 2 post-credit scenes. You're right. They did, because there wasn't one this time either. And there were supposed to be 9 for all 9 episodes. So let's see. We're back at the divorce case. We have Mr. Immortal. The fact that he's concerned about the financial impact on him is not entirely unfair. Again, I'm not a big family law attorney, but the times that I've had it, whether I represent the man or the woman, they're always worried. If they have to pay something out, if they have to split up physical property and stuff, they have to live in the aftermath of that, of course. So he says, nobody's tried more than me. I'm the good guy. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. Inevitably, when I'm in a marriage or relationship, things go stale. You know, and then he goes from like trying to be like, I'm the good guy, just sometimes things don't work out, which could be true, to, oh no, I say I'm the good guy, but I'm really not, because he's like, I find that they're emotionally suffocating me. They start wearing weird pajamas, you know, basically because the bloom off the rose of their marriage or whatever goes. So then he tells Mallory, so I just like walk into traffic to kill that version of myself and to end things then and there. And so then Mallory and Nikki are like, so you're trying to convince these ladies that you just died and then you disappear. And you learn more and more about this as the scene plays out, because it kind of gets worse and worse. Because in the beginning, you think it's just one party, then you learn it's 8. He's apparently bisexual. He has a male partner or ex-spouse, and the other 7 are women. He's had children with some and not with others. And he just, you know, fakes his own death and goes skipping out. And you're like, well, how did they find out about it? And not only how they find out about it is interesting, but it plays into what starts to become a threat to She-Hulk as well. So I love how they weave all this stuff together. So then he tries to assure Mallory and Nikki that this is the most considerate way to end a marriage. Instead of telling somebody something that will offend them, I don't love you anymore, whatever, I don't want to be married anymore. You know, instead of hurting their feelings and going through a messy divorce, if they just think he's dead, they can collect insurance and or otherwise go on with their life, which automatically as an attorney, you're like, that's a red flag, that's fraud. And then, of course, if he's faking his death, it's fraud. If he's faking his death and they're collecting on insurance policies, they may be innocent, but it's still fraud. And if that can get proven later, believe it or not, here comes an attorney moment. The insurance company that paid out the proceeds, when they find out that this guy isn't really dead, they may call for him to go to criminal, you know, through criminal proceedings for the fraud. And they will ask for the party or parties that they paid out to disgorge what they got paid. And if they don't do that, they'll go into civil court against the otherwise innocent parties, perhaps, like in this Mr. Immortal mess. And so they'll get back their insurance proceeds, and it could render them uninsurable because there are huge databases that track everybody's credit and their fraud risk and everything. It's crazy. So Mr. Immortus, it couldn't just be, as Mallory says point blank later, you know, you're lucky nobody's trying to call the police, sue you for fraud, you know, anything like that. But there is potential exposure to some of the claimants that have popped up along the way too. So this just becomes a worse and worse mess as this plays out. And so she's speaking her mind. She's her attorney. She's his attorney. And she's getting salty with him. And of course, Nikki's joining in. And he goes, wow, I thought lawyers were not supposed to be judgmental. And they do make the very fair case. No, they just represent you. And attorneys can drop clients if they feel that there's it could be because of a conflict of interest that pops up and, ooh, I didn't know, so goodbye. It could be because of a breakdown in communications in New York State. That's a magic phrase that attorneys can use. And they just don't have to represent you if they don't like you. The flip side of that is I could represent somebody and not like you at all, not agree with what you did or didn't do or what you want to do or what you don't want to do, whether it's a matrimonial case or not. I don't have to sit there and tell you what you want to hear. As your paid legal advocate, I have to tell you what you need to hear. And if I have a personal human opinion about it, I can say that too. Some folks might not, some folks do. So they get so critical of him just being like very flippant, like, I just pretend I'm dead and then I go on to the next person. And the other people that I leave in my wake, even if I have children, like they'll just move on with their lives after their grief. This is better and easier for everyone. Of course, it's better and easier for him. So they make that point and he gets pissed. And so what does he do? It's his coping mechanism. He goes flying out the window to like kill himself or die out of that set of circumstances. And he just walks away. And people are filming him. And we circle back to the content that was created from him crashing on the security, car and walking away. But of course, there's also that social commentary as he does, scoop himself up, get his hat, and walk away. Then instead of dialing 911, people are just recording him. Like, that's your first reaction? So then Nikki quips to Mallory, well, at least we know how he does it, meaning how he gets out of just uncomfortable, situations all the time. And like, we don't have Mr. Immortal's powers, but a lot of us have our thing to like pivot and get out of a potentially ugly situation. It may be lines that we say, it may be things that we do. We might pretend we have stomach pains to get out of a meeting we don't feel like sitting through, anything like that. I'm too tired to go out, but that's not really, the thing. So it's kind of like always this running social commentary, So then we have a scene change. We're at the rehearsal party, dinner, what have you. Lulu asks how Jen is doing, and Jen thinks that this is a moment for them to catch up with one another, which could have been the case. So she starts talking about her professional life, her superpowered life. She is trying to say, I've been doing pretty good, come to think of it. Just because I don't have a ring on my finger, you didn't give me a +1 because you knew I didn't have someone in my life. +1 means I could bring a guest, just in case we're not clear. And Lulu's like, oh, no, I don't care about any of that, which is so bridezilla and insensitive. She goes, are you dating a guy? Well, clearly she didn't think that she was because she didn't give her a +1. But it also shows that some people really are. It's not the 50s anymore. It's not even the early aughts anymore. It's decades later, and still some people really are one-track minds. Are you married yet? Are you coupled up yet? Are you living with someone yet? It doesn't matter how good you're doing otherwise. It doesn't matter how good you're doing professionally. It only seems to matter to some people out there, even today. Are you in a relationship? Oh, okay. So, and then Jen's like, no, I'm not. And she goes, oh, I'm so sorry. Lulu, the bride who's getting married, says, don't worry, you'll find someone. That would be one thing. But then she gives a quick chaser of don't feel bad, which is really ridiculous because some people don't care to be in a relationship at all. Why would they feel bad? And Jen reassures her, I don't feel bad. Then Lulu shows that she's just disconnected and clueless when she's like, they haven't just grown apart. I assure you. She goes, that's right. You still have a little bit of time, which is painful in two different directions. Number one, maybe Jen really doesn't care. Like, I'll get in a relationship. That'll be great. If I don't, I don't. And this woman's showing that she's tone deaf to who Jen is or what she wants. But to also say you have a little bit of time is basically saying that Jen is seconds away from being declared a spinster who can't even have kids if she wants. All right. Then we see Titania. So Titania had said things weren't over, hater, but Titania is making all like smooth and like, she's playing her politics. Hey, Jen, it's good to see you. And then she's, of course, very backhanded blessing about it. I love that you never make any effort at all. And Jen just cuts to the chase. What are you doing here? This is my friend's wedding. I was friends with her back in the day. You aren't a friend of hers. You can't pull your crap here. And then Titania is just like, the answer to your very rude question is that I happen to be dating a friend of the groom. No one believes that it's just that serendipitous, right? So, and what I love is they're still showing her to be true to form, Titania. She's all pink. She's all gaudy and fluffy and like extra. She's got these huge boss earrings on. And why that's funny if you're female is because like the whole boss, lady boss, girl boss movement was huge. You had books, you had websites, you had quotes, you had people building entire businesses off cheering women to become self-employed entrepreneurs, being the boss of their own life. There's nothing wrong with this. It's just that is so like played at this point. That's no longer the rage. In fact, now, even as a woman, I can say, and as a self-employed woman, I spent 17 and a half years working for other firms. Now I work for myself, right? And that's been for like 8+ years. So, I too was like, hey, girl boss, but now it's like really played. And even I can say it's a bit of a meme. Okay. So Lulu, meanwhile, is fawning all over Titania because she's a big name, she's a superpowered individual, and she's a huge influencer, right? We can't take that away from Titania. But what's really funny is that for Lulu, it's okay that she has that superpowered individual there who isn't even her friend, isn't even in her wedding party. Oh, no, no, no. And in fact, she shows how much she loves her for being an influencer. There's no upset at her for possibly upstaging the bride. But childhood friend Jen, I can crap on her all day long. Don't you dare show up as She-Hulk. Don't you dare upstage me. So Jen is doing another fourth wall break and says, Titania weaseled into this wedding just to mess with me. Why doesn't anybody see that? Right? And so in the meantime, Lulu's like all offended, like, don't be mean to Titania. And meanwhile, while Lulu's upbraiding Jen for this, you can see the expression on Titania's face. She's staring holes through Jen. Jen's totally right. Okay. But then meanwhile, she's like, I'm just here to celebrate the love of Lulu and her groom, who at this point still remains nameless. And you might wonder why that's the case. If nothing else, the social commentary here is, and I'm not saying this is always the case, but can feel like that, it's all about the bride that day. The groom is like an accessory or something. So we never really see the groom throughout this entire episode. I don't even think in the post-credit scenes. Who we see the bride with is hysterical if you saw the credit scenes, not the post-credit scenes. But, you know, we don't even know his name. Nobody says his name. You don't see him. You might see the bridegrooms later in a pack, but you don't even see him with them then. And then Titania is like, see, not everything's all about you, Jennifer, as Jennifer stalks off. She sits alone outside. And then a dude steps up to her. He's playing Mr. Nice Guy. You wonder how legit he is or he isn't. And he and Jen connect. His name is Josh. He kind of slightly starts to hit on her, but he's not being a sleaze. But you're like, we know that she doesn't end up with anyone named Josh in the traditional comic book Saga. You know that part of the She-Hulk thing is she doesn't get married. Actually, in the comic book Saga, she did briefly, but then there was a whole question in terms of whether or not that marriage was even a real thing. And Eros, or Star Fox, who we saw introduced in a post-credit scene in the Eternals movie, plays into that. He's actually a lover of Jennifer's along the way. But that hasn't happened here yet. I do think it would be very interesting to see down the line them playing those two against one another in the MCU. So it's like, I don't think Josh is meant to be anything, but I think how they play it out to the very end of this episode with him being there, I'm wondering if he's bait. And let me know what you think in the comments down below, live or on the replay. Do you think Josh is bait for the big overarching plot that's been going on with the Wrecking Crew? Probably one of her 4 matcher dates, who's a big client of GLK&H, just to weave in more complexity. And I do think that the leader is in the background driving the whole bus on this. It may not be anything that we see teased until the last second when season 1 is over. We do know from announcements that are out there, and they reintroduced the original actor who played the leader in the original version of the Hulk. We know that he's going to be the big bad of New World Order. And I'm like, thank God, because if they made New World Order about politics, I would absolutely freak out. I'm sick of politics. I don't care where you stand, and this is not a channel on politics. Rami says, everyone is sus. Absolutely. Rami says, everything for her must be very unnerving. Well, yes, because think about it, personally and or professionally, you know, who am I going to get exposed to? Who has an angle, whether it's because I'm a superhero and they want to fight me, because I'm a superhero and they want to exploit me for their own purposes, because I'm a superhero and they just can't see past the allure of that to who I am as a person. You can do a ton of really great storytelling starring Jennifer Walters. You really can. I love it. I think this is great. But then again, I'm female, so that's part of the overarching target audience for this series. And then, of course, well-evolved men like Rami and many others. There are plenty of bloggers and industry folks that are male, identify as male, that are totally defending this series. And I don't think it's because they're a shell. So Jennifer asks if Josh was given a +1 for the wedding, and it's noteworthy, and it kind of factors into my concern that he could be bait also. He does not have a +1. He was not able to bring a date or a guest to the wedding. And Jennifer does ask him, I don't understand. Do you understand the metrics of how people decide? Sometimes it is a matter of cost. I will tell you that as someone who is married. Although all my wedding party, they all had their +1s, because I think all but in one or two instances, two at the time still, they were all married anyway. What am I going to do? Say don't bring your spouse? Besides, I was friends with all of them, including their spouses. I want everyone there. But sometimes people are kind of cash strapped. And so one of the ways that they'll cut back is they'll say, no one can bring a +1, or no one in the wedding party can bring a +1, or both. Later on, we see they have a cash bar, which is just, please, if you're going to have a wedding or any sort of major event, a cash bar is kind of a major downer. You may have no choice, but I'd almost rather you wait a little bit longer and allow for there to be at least a no cash bar for an hour, and then let people, if they want after an hour or two, they want to, continue to drink, then it's a cash bar. I don't know. But to just have a total cash bar and then they're upcharging her for a heavy pour of $5. I know it's LA. If she's still in LA, I forget if she had to really, really travel for this. Holy moly. Sorry about that, guys. Oh, and by the way, this isn't sponsored by G Fuel or anything. Don't, please no. I have to be careful, especially as a lawyer. All right. So, he acknowledges he didn't get a +1 either. Again, I think it factors into that he's bait because he's less fleshed out as like a real life person when he doesn't have a wedding ring, when he doesn't have a partner, when he doesn't have a date. It keeps him a little bit more two-dimensional, which sometimes that can just happen. But this is a limited series of 9 episodes. Everything has to pull its weight, either within the episode itself, or there are loops. The Chekhov's gun open loop happens, and then we pull the viewer from episode to episode where the loop at some point gets closed. So he's not just in there extraneously. Just like her first 4 dates, even if nothing else happens, they still were, and this is great storytelling, holistically, they created an open loop that gets closed with the trademark infringement case as non-party witnesses. So it's really clever what they're doing. So I think the guy is kind of sus. I do agree with Rami. So let's see. Oh, so then Lulu comes out and she's basically treating Jennifer like not even a friend, not even a member of the wedding party. She's asking her to help out because she goes, some of the help is quitting because of how I'm treating them. And she puts it in air quotes, which is annoying to do most of the time. But then clearly she's being bridezilla and chasing away the help. So she goes, could you clean some stuff up and tidy up? That's really not something that anybody in a bridal party should ever do. So now it's showing that she has zero respect for their old friendship. And Jennifer ends up being treated as worse than the hired help, because at least the hired help, they're getting paid. Jen is expected to do this work for free. And Jen also spent how much money on the bridesmaid's dress, because don't think the bride and groom ever provide that. That never happens. So she had to spend money on a dress she's probably never going to use again. The shoes to go with it, probably, that she's never going to use again. Whatever, even if she's still in LA, there was some travel, some sort of hotel accommodations, whatever. And this is at least 2 days of her life. So she spent money, she spent time away from work, and now she has to go do work that other people got paid for. It shows how Jen, especially by agreeing to do it, is allowing herself to be treated. There is a saying that says that we teach others how to treat us. Jen has been allowing people to just kind of crap on her, from her family in episode 1 to this friend in, episode 6. Rami says, kudos to Jen for staying calm. I would have hulked out twice. I agree. And Rami says, but that was very disrespectful. Yeah, except some people are so self-centric, whether they're being bridezilla or not, whether it has anything to do with the wedding or not. Sometimes we are very tone deaf to the environmental impact of what we ask someone to do. And clearly Lulu is one of them. So, all right. Lulu is officially a bridezilla. If you didn't think she was before, she totally is now. So now we're back to GLK&H. We've got a scene change. We're in their conference room. Nikki and Mallory on one side of the very big long table babysitting Mr. Immortal, their client. The other side has an attorney and has like 8 ex-spouses. A man and 7 women. And so, and they've all got their complaints about how they have been put out to even having very difficult lives after they've been left in the wake of Mr. Immortal leaving them, which was bad enough for them, but then pretending he's dead so that they're forced to do everything on their own until they became the wiser because of what one of the ex-spouses learned. And then they don't really say too much about it, but I guess she researched, found a bunch of other people, and they came and banded together, the 8 of them, with shared counsel, which, as long as there's no conflict of interest, you could do. I mean, class actions are, one attorney can represent everyone in that class action. And again, it doesn't rise to the level of a class action because there's not 20 or more people in it. Then again, I don't know Californian law past a certain point. I have done some stuff in federal court, but regardless, I don't think there's enough for a class action, but my goodness, 8 is a lot. He has just been prodigious about getting in and out of marriages and relationships. One of them's had a child and been left without child support and having to figure it out on their own. Others have made business investments that he's encouraged them to do because, he might have wanted to benefit with them, but then eventually is like, nah, I don't want to be with you, and he leaves. And they're just stuck with these things. So Mallory, of course, asks them collectively how they became aware of Mr. Immortal's pattern of behavior. And that's when one ex-partner says, a friend of mine sent me a link to a video that had him, and they recognized him. And it's on a site called Intelligentsia. Intelligentsia is kind of like a tongue-in-cheek kind of Illuminati sort of thing, but they're not the Illuminati. They're not the comic book Illuminati, but they kind of are like self-deputized, exclusive. This is an exclusive little club. We're creating content about ourselves. That's exciting. We're sharing information, that sort of thing. So, and one of them says a site for man babies, and someone else says yes. Oh, so funny. And they go, it becomes clear, really, that Mr. Immortal has used different names and aliases throughout the years and throughout the relationships. That's where you start getting into fraud, and so Mallory pulls him aside and says, what I'm thinking as an attorney, he's lucky that there aren't civil and or criminal charges because of fraud. The penal code in California says what it says about fraud. He could be in a lot of trouble. And again, like I said earlier, there could be insurance fraud issues that he just carelessly created for the people left in the wake who might have been turning in, life insurance policies that they have. Lots of spouses and partners take these out. And even though they were unwittingly victims themselves, they can get pulled into this stuff too. So then they can countersue him, and then they have to, Mr. Immortal has to pay to make whole the people who had to make whole the insurance companies because they were forced to legally disgorge the ill-gotten gains. What a mess. So Mr. Immortal's response to all of this stuff, I'm not going to say typical male because women can do this too, but he's like, I will never understand women. So Mallory she still has to be a good attorney. She goes, I will get you the best possible deal under the circumstances. And then he goes to go, okay. And she's like, don't touch me, which is a running thing with her, because she's had clients try to like tap her on the shoulder or put their arm around her, whether they're just being friendly or they're being sleazy or whatever. And she's like, don't touch me. She goes, but you're going to have to pay up a lot. So like, get ready for it. I've had to tell clients in more traditional general litigation that I've done, and the couple of matrimonial family court things that I've done, at times, depending upon the client, depending upon the circumstances, you do have to sometimes tell a client, you're not going to get out of here without paying anything. Let's talk about the spectrum of the relief that we're going to get. Or that we're going to give. You may not be able to get everything you want. You may not be able to walk out, not pay. It depends. So now we're at the wedding. Jen meets up with all the other bridesmaids, and they're all like, hey, but they're not really hanging out with her, including her. They're not caring that she's there. Actually, they're excited because they need help from her. Again, she's the hired help that doesn't even get paid. So it just makes that bad situation worse. Jennifer's just a step and fetch it for everybody at this point. And they're all concerned because the groomsmen, again, we never see the groom himself, but the groomsmen were playing Mario Kart and their shirts got wrinkled because they were all like into it. And so they basically not only shovel all the shirts off to put Jen on ironing duty, she had a glass of champagne that she was about to enjoy, and they swap out glasses so that she can take care of somebody's dirty glass too. And then of course, Lulu, just to really bring the Bridezilla trope home, shows up in like this horrendous headpiece and gown. It's purposefully awful because this is a comedy. So, and she's got a puppy in a groomsman suit, which is annoying enough as it is. I'm a pet owner and I don't enjoy it when people put their animals in costumes. Most vets and pet experts will be like, please don't do that. The animals don't like it. But then it gets worse because it turns out that that's Jonathan, and that's who Jennifer gets to go up the aisle with. So that's horrible on just so many levels because, don't you think that a human would rather be paired with a human, especially when they don't have a backstory with that pet? Clearly, Jennifer doesn't. But on top of it, again, she's a hired help that didn't get hired and doesn't get paid because she's, of course, going to have to walk the dog and take care of the dog afterwards. I mean, just when you think she can't sink any lower. So then we go back to GLK and H, and they're talking about the settlement and what ladies, the 7 wives, and Sebastian, the male husband partner, I still own all those Apple shares that I bought back in 1981 because he's immortal. He doesn't die. Plus all the gold left to me by my first wife, Baroness Cromwell. I do want to do some research on that to see that that's not an Easter egg, but it's hysterical because it shows he never dies. So like, I'm sure he's been out of how many marriages and relationships because people just croak along the way and he keeps going. Hilarious, right? So he's got gold from back in the olden days that he can pour into the pot. So he's trying to reassure everybody from an analytical level. I have a sufficient amount of money. I can settle this to everyone's satisfaction. But as we learn, not everybody's there for the money. And even the people who would like a payout get pissed because they're just being treated like a transaction. Rami says, reminded me of the scene from Friends where Ross was stuck with the dog during Phoebe's wedding. I wonder if there was a nod to it. That could be. And then Rami adds, Baroness Cromwell died in the 1500s. Oh my God. That's why I'm interested about Mr. Immortal. Almost certain I've heard it before. I want to agree with you. So that is too priceless. Yeah, so he's got plenty of money from everybody that he met and bedded and married and buried along the way. We're not worried about Mr. Immortal. We shouldn't have been in the first place. So he goes, I've got a bunch of stuff to pour into the pot, basically, for the settlement. And then how about you all split it 8 ways equally and call it square? Which, again, there are some people that they're not there for the money, but they'll take it. there are some people there that bring up very good points. Like, I have a child. Why should I have an equal share? You owe me child support too. Everybody's like, we haven't all been married or with him for the same amount of time. How do you do that? So to be fair, there are some people that are just pissed that he's treating it like a transaction. There are other people that have a very fair, legitimate point that you think this is an easy settlement. And even if we agree in terms of the global number, we stipulate and agree, like, you can have, whether it's a matrimonial case or not, you can have like mediations and arbitrations that are binding. So you're not allowed to walk out and not have a deal. I don't know if this is one of those things. It could have been. But actually maybe not, because there wasn't a mediator or an arbitrator there. It doesn't have to be done in a courtroom. It can be done in a private setting. Mediations and arbitrations can be done at separate facilities that are neutral to both parties. One of the two parties, let's say if there's just only two parties and two parties counsel, they can agree to have a mediation or an arbitration in their office, as long as all parties stipulate and agree. Usually you want to go to neutral territory, so afterwards everybody can decamp and get out of there. Everybody also wants to be on equal ground. But since this is a mediation, even if it's not a mediation with a capital M, they're trying to get everything settled without going back into court or into court if they haven't been there yet. And most smart attorneys will try to get things settled out if the facts and circumstances allow for it. And in most cases, according to the American Bar Association, even things that are put into litigation do not go to trial. I think it's like 95% of all those cases settle. But you can have high-low mediations and arbitrations that are binding. So you're not allowed to leave without settling the matter. But also we have a high-low. So it's not a matter of if the aggrieved party or parties are going to get paid. There's a floor and a ceiling. There's a limit. We establish a spectrum of the possible payout. It can't be less than this. It can't be more than that. So who knows? It could have been any of these things. But again, because I didn't see a mediator or an arbitrator identified, they're just trying to settle it amongst themselves. And that, of course, is the most popular thing. So Mallory's like, we are offering a generous settlement. I'll draw it up right away, which is actually smart too. You don't want anybody to hang out and go, but, and you could have gotten rid of the case. Now you can't. But that's when they all start making the very fair argument that equal shares wouldn't be fair under the circumstances. Mr. Immortal's response is the typical one. He just wants to flee. So he gets up and Nikki and Mallory are like, nope, sit down. Then the scene changed to Chet. This is the gift that just keeps on giving. My God, he is just the funniest ever. In episode 1, when Bruce Banner and Jennifer Walters were in the car before the Sakaar ship confronted them, they talked about Chet, they joked about Chet, and they shared a knowing, proud glance. I didn't know if it was because Chet was as smart as either one of them could be, or if they were being sarcastic. But man, by the time you got to the end of episode 1, you knew it was sarcasm, Sheldon, and it was just hilarious with him ever since. So now we meet Chet in obnoxious DJ mode, and it plays into the credit scenes that we get later. Some of those are static and some get swapped out. And when Chet shows up with Lulu, oh my God, that's so funny. But meanwhile, Chet's DJing. Jen goes to the bar. This is when she finds out it's a cash bar, and it's an expensive cash bar too. Rami says Chet is the show's longest running joke. Oh my God. You know they're going to have him all the way through episode 9, right? They have to. I wonder if we get Chet and Daredevil action later. That would be so funny. Because obviously, not to spoil that, Daredevil isn't in this episode. So Jen just concludes, this is a train wreck for me. I'm just going to, what else am I going to do for the next 4 hours of the reception? So she's going to get drunk. They play the song Walking on Broken Glass by the Eurythmics, and I'm going to look up the lyrics. I am familiar with the song, but I'm wondering if that is in and of itself a separate Easter egg, not just for this episode and what goes down all the way at the end. I do think that it ties into that. She's walking on broken glass. She's got to be careful in ways that she knows and in ways that she doesn't know. Because again, the way the episode ends, she's in way more danger than we think. And you think it's from the public from some of it, but then you're like, public and private interests are merging. And I think the private interest that has kind of steadily been her biggest enemy in the background, which is not Titania, and I don't think is the Abomination at all, I think you're going to be like, oh my God. But they're getting public sentiment against her because one way or another, they want her dead. Hey, Second Street Marvel, what's going on? Good morning. Haven't watched yet. Getting ready to do a watch party. Oh my God. Well, you're going to enjoy yourself. You're in for a treat. And if you've ever gone to a wedding, even from the perspective of, not the woman, not in the bride's party, not a traditional female view, it's going to be interesting to see what your responses are. I would definitely show up to Second Street Marvel's watch party, because to have a man review this or anybody that's not a traditional female review it, Trinity, oh my God, I can't wait to see what you're going to say. I had hoped the song had a hidden meaning. It's a deep and odd choice to have at a wedding. Yeah, I don't know if Chet was playing it or if they just did it as an overlay to whatever Chet was actually playing, but I do think that it is a deep meaning. And it can seem odd. I do want to look at the lyrics a little more closely, because again, she's walking on broken glass to keep things good at the firm, to keep her job, to prove to Mallory and other people that might have gotten pissed that she came in out of nowhere and pole vaulted over them to lead the division, that she deserves it. That's a lot of pressure that law officer not you can get. She's got the broken glass of, the dichotomy between Jennifer Walters, who she'd prefer, and She-Hulk that she's leaning into more and more as she goes. When it's convenient for her, of course. And then the dichotomy of, the dating world and all of the broken glass of dealing with the dating world. And then the threat that really is against her, that is more than just a one-time, one-off fight with the wrecking crew. Again, I do think they're ultimately working for and with the leader, but we'll see. But Jen continues to get trashed. The glass of her trying to keep herself all prim and, together is also shattering at the wedding because she gets sloppy drunk. We go back to GLK and H. Things seem to be getting better in terms of the mass settlement agreement between Mr. Immortal and his 8 ex-spouses. You'll notice that Nikki's got the scene under control when you see that, which lots of really good paralegals do. I was a paralegal for 6 years before I became an attorney. And if you're any good, an attorney will kind of, like, to whatever degree is appropriate under the circumstances, they'll sit back and let you run a lot of the show, which Nikki does. And the people seem to be getting more open with Nikki because she's a lovable, open, very social character. Mallory is trying to be the professional attorney and wear that hat, and she has to, of the two of them. But you notice how she takes in how well Nikki has everything under control, which sure, a really good attorney would do, the really good paralegal. I wonder if this isn't a Chekhov's gun where we're opening up another loop that in the last 3 episodes that we have left of She-Hulk, whether or not best friend or not, Nikki's going to be asked by Mallory nevertheless to be a paralegal exclusively with her. And or she may jockey to have Nikki work on more of her stuff, which means she's going to be working on less of Jennifer's stuff. And that's kind of a dichotomy as well. The glass of, and that's a challenge, the glass of Jennifer and Nikki as best friends and always on the same team, and Nikki's her ride or die, and she does all or most of her work. That glass might be breaking too. And that's a very real world. As Rami said earlier, there's a lot of real world resonance that goes on throughout this show, not let alone in this episode. And I think we're opening a loop that gets closed later, whether it's on a cliffhanger and they're going to come back with season 2, or it plays out and gets resolved over the next 3 remaining episodes for the season, that's something that can happen at a law office or many other offices as well. Rami says, I hope the song has a hidden E. Oh, we read that. To have it at a wedding. Every aspect of Jen's life is being challenged. Friendship, social life, love life, career, new enemies, all of those things. That's what keeps a story like this interesting when the character arc isn't your typical, comparatively speaking, more two-dimensional comic book, I go in and I fight thing, or I go in and I solve the mystery that I'm presented with and I fight, or I'm given a challenge personally and or professionally, but yet we have fight scenes too, whether it's She-Hulk or anybody else who's the central character. Here the character's journey isn't more traditional superhero, it's the struggle of a person like Jen in her shoes, and she's got the superhero thing that she's dealing with in a different way than Fear and Loathing or I Don't Understand. Because again, she got that whole learning curve, and so did a lot of her family from what happened with Bruce. So in order to keep this storyline interesting, they really have to pull on a lot of threads to make it work and to keep us as the audience invested in it. So you're going to have a lot of cameos, sure. You're going to have a lot of new enemies. Yes, they did promise us 9 post-credit scenes. Now we're down 2. I had my theory about that earlier. But then the personal and professional thing, right? And then we teach people how to treat us. And a lot of our family has treated us like crap. Or a lot of our friends or old friends treat us like crap. You know, we go out on dates and maybe we let people treat us like crap. Or we're married or coupled up and unfortunately we're letting them treat us like crap. And again, I have actually defended Holden Holloway. I don't think he's treating her like crap. I think law office corporate culture is different than what a lot of people think. So you do have the potential, the seeds are sown for Mallory and Jen to go back head to head, not because they hate each other, but there might be this tug of war over, I want Nikki more. No, I do. She should be exclusively assigned to me in my files. Oh no. And then that creates a very unhappy triangle where everyone's trying to be coworkers and everybody's good people and they're trying to be friendly enough, but you have that complication of, I want her, no, I do. I'm doing my job. Jen's my best friend, but I have to listen to the main partner who is still Holden Holloway, who might come in and say, ladies share. So that's a concern that I have, and I think that's why you see that scene. Then there's a scene change. Jen's drunk dialing Bruce and asking where he is. She's leaving a phone message. It's clear she's not on the phone with him, which is important. She also establishes for us, for the audience, that she's been trying to contact him for weeks and he's not calling back. And she's asking on the voicemail why. So, yes, we are still dealing with that whole Sakaar thing. He's clearly way out of range. He's dealing with whatever on Sakaar. And of course, I would not be the first Marvel theorist to talk about World War, Hulk, and, Scar and all that. Sorry, guys. Again, not sponsored by G Fuel. You can let me know what you think in the comments down below. I'm wondering if we had post-credit scenes. Here's a different theory that I have. I wonder if we had post-credit scenes that did touch upon that more, or kind of put the ball a little bit further up the field with Bruce and Sakaar more, and maybe they're reimagining it and they had to cut those scenes, those post-credit scenes or those stinger scenes. So Josh, dances up on Jennifer. They're hitting on each other. And again, it's like, is Josh bait? Is he bait to get at her? Because remember, the Wrecking Crew were trying to get an injection into Jen's arm, whether it was to kill her or to get a sample. And if it's the leader, they want a blood sample. And when you saw the beginning of this episode, they were very careful about showing you, they were very strategic about showing you what happened in episode 1, where Bruce was like, I'm destroying your blood samples that I took. I got what I needed out of them. Now I'm destroying them because I don't want this to get in the wrong hands. So when you see a big, thick syringe like that, It's not typically outgoing, it's incoming. They want to pull the sample out of her. But the wrecking crew couldn't do it. They replayed the one guy's reaction when they were in the getaway car. I couldn't penetrate her skin, so I couldn't get the sample, right? So Josh, meanwhile, is laying it into Jennifer. He's not being a sleazeball, so they're playing this very, very nuanced. But Jen goes outside to puke because she's been drinking and dancing and drinking and dancing, and we really don't see that she's been eating. So of course she's going to go puke. And that's when Titania decides to get to her because she's off and away from the others. And of course, she's in a vulnerable moment. So she, of course, punches her across the yard and she wants to fight her. And at least she's being honest. She confirms what we as the audience suspected and what Jennifer knew. I said things weren't over, and now I'm going to publicly humiliate you. And so Jennifer's like, oh, come on. I won that thing fair and square, meaning the trial from the past episode. And I broke that down. That was really accurate how they went about that case. And even though some of the evidence they had would be more traditional to introduce, I wouldn't be surprised if they did it. The 4 non-party witnesses, how that made sense. So Jennifer's like, listen, we tried the case. I paid my dues. I proffered my evidence. I won. Get over it. And Titania's like, I never get over anything. And so she just shoves Jen across the floor. And she's mad because Jennifer's staying human form. She's not hulking out. And she keeps egging her on to fight with her. Give Titania credit. Beating up a regular human being isn't something she wants to do. That's not fair. That's not the challenge. So she's like, get on up and fight me, superhero to superhuman. And Jennifer's all drunk, as we know. She's got double vision, and she's being a dope. She's like, you know what? I could take you like this. And then she punches at dead air and falls on her face. And Titania's like, this is just sad. It's no fun if you're not She-Hulk. Fair enough. So Jennifer asks her a fair question. Why are you so obsessed with me? If you read any of the write-ups about how Titania is going to be an enemy in the series, anyone who was in the know, and even the Jamila Jamil who plays her, says that Titania is meant to be more of an annoying foil to She-Hulk, and it's not always going to be beat 'em up, although they get physical here. And she says that Titania becomes obsessed with She-Hulk because she's an influencer, and She-Hulk very quickly eclipses her in terms of her power and social influence, whether she wanted it or not. And they go out of their way to really make her more of a complex character, which again is really great storytelling, because at first Titania says that she's not obsessed with Jen, but then says, but everyone else is obsessed with you. And she starts pouting about it because being an influencer and having that community is important to her. And she says, you took everything from me for something you don't even want, which is influence, which is attention, that you don't even deserve in terms of the influence and attention. Because to be fair, Jen wasn't strategically trying to be an influencer and build a business model and an empire that way. Titania was. And whether or not you think Titania is dopey as a character, you do have to pay her some mind. Being an influencer, being an entrepreneur that way, influencer is a business model. And so that's messing with somebody's money, not just their ego, not just their power. And so, this has taken a lot of work on Titania's part. And now she's mad because she has somebody that not only took her business line away from her, she had her own line going and her own platform going. But now even that's starting to erode because everyone loves She-Hulk more. And she didn't even want the name originally. And she didn't even look to have the powers or work that kind of business model. So, Titania is made more of a fleshed out enemy who has some legit concerns. That's when the storytelling is most powerful. Instead of good guy, bad guy, and boom, boom, boom. I just aligned myself with the Legion of Doom, and now we're the bad guys. No, they are adding another dimension to Titania, who on one hand is ridiculous, but on the other hand, with this exchange becomes more of a sympathetic character. You don't have to agree with her, but you do see the point that she's making. Hey, Mike, what's going on? Hi. So Titania's pissed, and the only way she can make herself feel better is to beat up on not Jennifer, the She-Hulk herself. So she's trying to be fair too. So again, it adds another layer of sympathy to this character. I could totally turn you into a bloody smear on the floor as a human. No, give me a challenge. I'd rather fight you toe to toe. So she tells her to green up, and Jennifer says she will. Long story short, she does. And you can see the smile on Titania's face because she's like, there you go. Now we're evenly matched. And Jen ground pounds and sends Titania flying. She goes back into the building, back into the reception, and onto the dance floor. Perfect. So you see She-Hulk come striding in, still wearing the bridesmaid's dress, and she's looking determined. And the bridesmaid's dress goes from looking ridiculous on Jen and other human beings to looking really great on She-Hulk. Because, of course, her hair and everything else is awesome when she does that, right? So Josh is smiling at her, and she smiles back and waves. It's yet another instance of somebody that likes her as a She-Hulk. However, Josh liked her as the twerpy little human being too. But I still think he's a plant. Avengers music is playing. Jennifer's all confident. This is the best. She comes flying at Titania. And of course, that's when Chet decides to play the electric slide, which, as long as we're dealing with wedding tropes, that's been a wedding reception classic since, a few generations ago, right? So, Jen is smiling confidently the way Titania did in the beginning as she's hulking out. You can see that even though she wasn't intellectually struggling with the powers, there was no fear and loathing. She owned it because of her cousin. That part of the learning curve was through. You can see that just like Titania was smiling when she went to attack her and smiling when she said, good, let's make this even toe to toe. Jennifer's smiling now confidently as she fights too. Titania is no easy mark. The fight scene seems pretty evenly matched. But now as the fight wears on a bit, Titania sees that people are taking pictures of her, and it's not the type of content that she wanted. She absorbs that fact that people are just watching her and She-Hulk fight, and this isn't really flattering content that's being created in connection with her. Given the fact that she's an influencer and the type of business model that she has, when you think about it, these are concerns she would have. So then, of course, it breaks her concentration. She gets hit more. Then she slips and falls on her face, and then her veneers are broken, and so she looks horrendous, and people are still taking pictures and video. She grabs one of the cameras and says, do you think this is funny? Are you showing your 11 followers on Instagram? Which is funny on two levels, because most of us really have 11 followers on Instagram, or not much more. Especially if we're not trying to be an influencer like her, but because she's an influencer, this is a measure of her, of how she's mighty besides superpowers. She's a huge platform that was well established last episode. And even though She-Hulk is chipping away at that platform, she didn't go to zero. Nobody canceled her, right? But this is how she makes herself feel better. You have 11 followers and I have 11 million followers, right? And as she's dealing with the embarrassment of the broken veneers and people are just treating her like a thing, you notice that She-Hulk / Jen is looking at her with sympathy. Like she actually feels bad that things got to this point. And then Titania just is embarrassed and ashamed. So she steals the groom's cake and runs off, declaring that the wedding sucks. And you'll note that She-Hulk doesn't look triumphantly proud or anything like that. It's a very complicated look, like I kind of wish it didn't get like this. And of course, Chet's entirely wholly insensitive, and he's playing an air horn like, but that's not Jennifer's reaction. You know what I mean? That's not how she feels. That's not how she feels. What's interesting is when you see the bride, Lulu, come up to her, she looks really sour. And Jennifer / She-Hulk is like, oh, Lulu, I know I promised. Because she did promise. And the bride is pissed. But, Jen's like, but she sucker punched me. I kind of had to. So, the bride does look like she wants to totally freak out. But then you see her face change and she's trying her best to make lemonade out of lemons. And she's like, oh, She-Hulk's at my wedding. I love you so much. And then everybody's like, aw. So now we're back at Mallory's office. Her broken window is boarded up for the time being. And she and Nikki are celebrating the wrap up of the Mr. Immortal matter. Mallory says, I don't know why people get married. And I don't know how that guy got 8 different spouses. And then they go and they look at the Intelligentsia website because of what one of the ex-spouses said. This is how I figured it out. And then I reached out to other people and oh my God, he's posting footage about himself and or other people are posting footage on this Intelligentsia website. Now, this is my first viewing and it's raw. I do want to go back because I know it's an Easter egg. It says top 10 destinations, Cookville and All Good. So I definitely want to look that up to see where in the comic book saga, the traditional comic book saga, one or both of those locations factor in. And then we have as the sidebar, Slutty She-Hulk, which is another category of content on the Intelligentsia website. It's interesting how, as they're looking at the screen and they're talking, Mallory does acknowledge, even though she's not wearing a wedding ring that I saw, that nevertheless, she's been married for a long time. She was just mulling over why people get married. She also lets slip that she has children. Nikki kind of, and this is a natural thing, like how many kids do you have and stuff like that. And then she draws a line and says, no more, she does let Nikki down in a nice way. You don't know how much of that is an open loop. It's a Chekhov's gun, and we have to close that loop later. We don't know if that just shows up personally, professionally. We don't know if that has to do with a superpowered human. We don't know. We do know that she lets Nikki down in a nice way, so she's not trying to be creepy about it. So then they want to look at the Slutty She-Hulk section because that's what people would do. Not just women. You'd be like, how is she slutty? But now they're being forced to create a profile to look at it. And that's where, for the first time in the MCU, the shulking phrase is used as well. And that was something that was used in the comic book saga, like Shulky that we had Nikki call Jennifer back in the beginning of the episode. So they create a fake account and they get accepted. This is not only not a flattering site in a very large part, it is She-Hulk centric, but it's not flattering at all. In fact, there's a huge category for hashtag cancel She-Hulk. She's accused of having man-hating tendencies. And if she were a man, she'd be canceled. That's weird. It makes me wonder if Titania isn't somehow connected with that, because that to me doesn't feel like an observation that a man would make. Maybe I'm wrong. And there's a lot of violent tendencies towards She-Hulk. Someone just shoots She-Hulk. Why hasn't somebody already done this? Some of this stuff is only a couple hours old, too. There's a lot of fresh stuff. There's memes that degrade her as a person, as a superhero, as both. One of the memes says, wants equality, but still wants you to pay for dinner. That's interesting. You wonder if that's some sort of generic meme that they're forming to She-Hulk, or if one of the 4 dates, what was his name, Todd? If Todd, who it turns out is a client of Mallory's at GLK&H, you're wondering if he has something to do with the site itself. He has something to do with that section of the site, because there's only been 4 people who have dated her as She-Hulk. And, it's not like she's been out dating like that for that long. She hasn't even been She-Hulk, comparatively speaking, for that long. Out in public, no less. So I'm wondering. Todd still feels hinky to me. Then there's another one. Wears yoga pants, mad if you look. And then a separate meme that says guilty of dressing like a man. Why is this important? Because the social commentary here is damned if you do, damned if you don't as a woman. If you dress like a man or you try to go gender neutral, which a lot of attorneys do that are female or identify as female but don't want to make a big deal about it, you just don't want to come across as a sex object. You don't want to distract the judge, and you don't want the judge and the law clerk to treat you like crap. If you act like an airhead, they will. And some judges will make you cover up your arms. At least when I was actively in the court system, it's been about 8 years. I'm self-employed and I'm a virtual only attorney now. But, if you wore open-toed shoes as a female, you could get yelled at. If you wore a skirt that was cut too high, something might be said to you off the record. They're not going to embarrass you in open court. If you showed up in a dress without a jacket, they might say something to you, even if it's 80, 90 degrees, even just a light sweater to just cover your arms so that you look like a professional in front of the judge. So there is that dynamic that a lot of lay people don't appreciate. But the social commentary here is, if I try to dress just skirted suit, boring, basic, generic, no one likes that because then I'm not acting like a female. But if I wear something that is personal or professional, shapely, conforms to my shape, then you get mad at me because you think I'm asking for it, the attention or whatever kind of like aggression you might put my way. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. So, could be misogyny. That goes on still in the modern day world. We have this double standard. That and the fact that the site is trying to monetize, you can see on one sidebar, on the right sidebar, it's facing the screen, they're trying to get you to pay for an ad-free experience so they can monetize the site, is so a current day thing. It does make that site feel more real also. So it's not just a tongue-in-cheek humor. It's like, this feels real to you as a viewer, or more real than it would. And then it's worrisome because she has a ton of haters, which people with public brands and files and profiles and stuff like that, that's part of the territory. Mallory does make the point, let's not go too crazy with this. Anybody who's got a high profile can get some haters, can get some trolls, and they're not all going to be mature. And some of them will like splash out digital verbal vomit, but they're not really going to act on it. Like, no, Nikki, let's not tell her. Why do you want to put it in her head? It'll mess with her game. Don't feed the anger fire that's going on here by giving it attention. It's tricky. You don't know how to call this one, right? So Nikki says fine to Mallory, but immediately in the next scene, she's doing what most loyal best friends would do. The second you're away from the naysayer, you're going to get on the phone if you can't get the person in person, and you're going to tell them as soon as you can. So she's giving Jen by voicemail all the details about the intelligentsia, and she's warning her that this is a danger, this is a thing. Which before the episode closes, we know for sure Nikki's right. But now we're back to the scene where Jen's splitting fries with Josh. It's the aftermath of the wedding reception. It's late, it's dark, and then you see the screen, the image, you can tell they're being watched, right? Because then it kind of glitches and becomes a computer screen. And just like I said earlier, part of that computer screen has a file and a profile on Jennifer, but there's also this thing that says macro blood LV aster levels is going to be my guess. So remember, the Wrecking Crew was trying to get a blood sample from her, and they couldn't do it when she was in She-Hulk form. Remember also when she was on a date with Todd, that Todd was fishing for details about her strengths and her weaknesses. And he was trying to see how her skin could get pierced. Would vibranium do it? She basically said, I don't know about that, but when I'm in She-Hulk form, nothing on earth can pierce my skin or really, really hurt me. So it's like, is Josh a plant where he's gaining her trust and keeping her in human form? Because he's not goading her to become She-Hulk. He might have in the reception like smiled at her and like, waved and seemed fine and accepting of both the Jennifer and the She-Hulk, but he didn't ask for her to look like that. He's not dating her specifically because she looks like that. And she's hanging out with Josh in human form being watched. This is the perfect opportunity, whether Josh is in on it as a plan or not, for the wrecking crew, and perhaps the leader comes into this, to go get the sample now while they can. And you can see on the screen that a pop-up, or a notification, I should say, comes from Intelligentsia's website itself. Is the next phase of the plan ready to go? And it's Hulk King, but all is one word. Hulking, Hulk King. Interesting. So we're at a lab as we pan backwards from that screen and that notification, and you can see that gloved hands, you don't see the people's faces or anything. There's a couple people there, but gloved hands are preparing a blood collection kit. And there's ominous music, and we fade to black. Now, as I said earlier, there's no post-credit scenes. Meanwhile, there was supposed to be one for every episode originally. But we do see a couple of the scenes as the credits play. Some of them are always static and the same, but some of them they switch out from episode to episode. So number one, we see Jen and Josh getting closer. They're taking photos that are on a strip that you get from the photo booths that, at least for a time, were very common at wedding receptions. And then you see Chet and Lulu in another strip, and he's caught making out with the bride. And we finally learn the groom's name, at least, that's on the bottom of that corresponding strip. And it's Adam. I wonder if Adam is an Easter egg for what we're going to see, possibly opened up at the end of Guardians of the Galaxy, the holiday edition, that will cross over into, 2023's Guardian of the Galaxy Volume 3. Because we know Adam Warlock is going to be, at least an initial big bad in there. But I do think that, just like in the comics, Adam will end up being like, oopsie, I shouldn't be a bad guy. These people have the real deal. But Rami says, first time I heard it, I thought it wrote hulking. Yeah, no, I know. And I think that's a play on words. I think it's somebody's screen name, Hulk with King with the capital K, but I also think hulking. I also wonder if we're going to get, a very much more savage version of She-Hulk, which a lot of Marvel theorists have been saying might be something that plays out during this first season, where it's kind of like World War She-Hulk kind of erupts. I don't know. We have 3 episodes left. We haven't yet seen Daredevil yet, although he's been teased. So I don't know. That sounds like a bit of a tall order for this season, although they could be opening a loop to that with her losing it at the very end of the last episode. But the fact that Chet is in there making out with Lulu is absolutely hilarious. Titania is also shown in one of those scenes as the credits roll. She's getting her veneers fixed, which is nice, but also she's documenting it for content. So she's ever the influencer, ever creating content. It is a big part of her business model. She still wants to sell her own merch. She still wants to get sponsorships and have affiliate links and stuff like that. So I joke around that this is not, I'm not doing sponsorships or anything for G Fuel. I could be, because no matter how big or small your platform is, depending upon the circumstances, you might get a deal, right? So then you also see Mallory and Nikki in a work scene together. There's 20 seconds remaining on Nikki's phone as a timer. They're counting down the rest of the time remaining for Mr. Immortal to look into the eyes of one of his exes. I forgot to say this before, but when they were hammering out the settlement, I know I said that not all of them cared about the money or was even there for the money. One of them was like, you escaped from me, and I want you to look into my eyes. I'm a person that was in your life. You need to acknowledge that. So funnily enough, that must have been part of the ultimate settlement. Everybody got some money or whatever, but this woman got what she wanted, was for Mr. Immortal to look into her eyes for 2 minutes or something like that. He's down to the last 20 seconds. The woman seems confident and happy. And Mr. Immortal, he joked that would feel like a lifetime. So you can see we're down to the last 20 seconds and he's pouring sweat. He doesn't want to do it anymore. So being Mr. Immortal, it was a convenient way for him to escape anything he didn't feel like dealing with. And she's smart. She wanted her cake and eat it too. Give me a payout, but I'm also making you stay in something that at least for 2 minutes you can't escape. All right. So that's all my first notes and observations and responses. As per usual, I like how they're handling this. And I like how, even though it wasn't the main focus of the episode, our legal flavor of the week was matrimonial and family court, which is really funny. I can't wait to see what they do for the last 3 episodes. I don't want to ruin it in terms of where I think some of their legal stuff will go. I don't know that we have enough time to really do a World War She-Hulk thing, but again, I think they might tease that into the next season. What do you guys think, live or on the replay? And were there any Easter eggs that I might have missed? The Baroness is somebody I want to look into more. Mr. Immortal and his full impact as even a C or D list character I want to see. We haven't seen the frog guy yet. I can't wait for that to plan. And I know that those 2 locations, Allgood and Cookville or whatever, those somehow relate to She-Hulk. Also, I didn't catch it this viewing. I don't know where the scan code is for your free Hulk comic. I've gotten it every single time, but not this one. I'll look it again. I'll look through it again to see where it is. All right. So Rami says, I agree that the absence of the post-credit scenes could be due to Wakanda Forever. Do you think the syringe might be vibranium related to the leader or maybe even Dr. Doom? Oh, you're welcome, Mike. I always enjoy that. Thanks for breaking it down. I had a lot of legal stuff that I had to take care of this week, so I couldn't do any of the pre-edited videos that I wanted to do for this channel. I did pop out one for the main Stacey Storino channel where, believe it or not, not just for influencers, but I do, I've had that channel for a couple years. And I talk about content marketing so that you can get more conversions for your business no matter what content model. It is one of my biggest clients is Joe's Dairy Bar and Grill. They have over 800,000 people on TikTok and a ton of people on Facebook and Instagram. And they got to 7 figures because of the content marketing strategy that I helped them with starting 2015 going into 16. Do I think that the syringe might be vibranium? That they might have some liquefied form of vibranium? That's a really good question, Rami. I don't know if they want to kill her as opposed to get the blood sample from her and study that and then maybe kill her off. Or there seemed to be a lot going on in that kit. It could be a 2-for-1. Let's subdue her. Let's get the blood sample. And then maybe if we have to kill her, it could be a 2-for-1. I do think it's related directly to the leader. Again, they've already reintroduced that actor and confirmed he is going to be not only in the MCU moving forward, he's going to be the big bad of Captain America 4, New World Order. Of course, the leader wants to lead the whole planet and have everyone answer to him. And of course, if you saw the original Hulk movie that the leader appeared in, when he took the blood himself, because he was testing on himself, right? When his head started to shapeshift and grow, he did look shocked because his body is going through a metamorphosis, but you saw the smile, right? Like he was liking that was happening to him and that he was transcending being an ordinary human being to evolve up to something else that could take control and become the leader of humanity. So I know he wants the blood because he wants to study it and he wants to use it, just like how he was tricking Bruce Banner in the original Hulk movie to send him more samples. He was pretending that he was helping Bruce, but really at the end of the day, he was helping himself. In terms of Dr. Doom, now I know that they have basically confirmed, or all but confirmed, that Dr. Doom, even if he is in a post-credit or stinger scene for Wakanda Forever, they're going to show him. And there has been some discussion that maybe they will just show an actor like in a suit, but we don't see the face because they haven't cast him yet, or at least as of the time all the footage needed to be in for Wakanda Forever, they hadn't casted that character yet. I mean, there's a lot on the line with Fantastic Four. They've just, it's not Marvel Studios per se that flubbed it, but like any of the previous studios that created either of the two main incarnations of the Fantastic Four, you had one incarnation that absolutely didn't work, and Ryan Arey from Screen Crush breaks that down. I probably should put a link to that in the show notes below on the replay. And I love that Ryan Arey outed himself once as a teacher. You could tell he just is so good at teaching us, like, not only all the themes and picking out all the Easter eggs, but he weaves it into storytelling, and he also weaves it into filmography and pop culture very, very well. And he does break down why the Fantastic Four is so good in the comics. And the second time around that they tried to recast those characters, it absolutely didn't work. I don't think there was any chemistry between any of those characters, let alone any of those characters in Doctor Doom. Nobody worked individually or together, and the story just stunk too. But the first go round, they had a couple, they had a sequel or two for the original Fantastic Four team, but the storytelling wasn't the best. And so now this is the third time around. So you want 3 times to be a charm. You're also weaving them into the overarching and now very intricate MCU. So that's a challenge anyway. And you tried it twice before and it didn't work. And, Doctor Doom, I have to be honest with you, I've not yet seen a version of Doctor Doom that to me was compelling. The first version of him was fine, but I was like, The second version, ugh. So, they so they've got a couple of challenges on their hands. And where was I going with this? Because now I'm having a senior moment about where I was going with this. I'm happy about everything I said, but how does that relate to She-Hulk? Well, She-Hulk eventually gets on the Fantastic Four team for a while in the comics, but that's not my point. They have to be really very careful. Oh, yeah, Wakanda Forever, because they're most definitely, from the sources, going to show a version of Doctor Doom who is indirectly driving that bus, or directly, indirectly driving the bus of what happens. Charlie from Emergency Awesome, I think, put it best when he said that it's a misdirect. It's really, Namor is always meant to be an anti-hero, and yeah, sometimes he's the villain. That's true in the comic book Saga. But I think in the MCU, he's definitely going to start off as a villain, but then it's going to get all murky and he's an anti-hero because he's trying to protect his people. And I think the whole vibranium dust up is going to piss him off. And he's going to go after the Wakandans because he thinks they're driving the bus or they're part of the equation. It's their fault that his people are getting, troubled because of, their access to vibranium. So Mike says, I know a YouTuber that was expecting more of a Law and Order show. This is more like Ally McBeal to me. Does the law scenes seem somewhat believable? And what if the person in the lab works for the Thunderbolts? That's always a possibility. But I don't get the same kind of Contessa vibe going on. And I love Julie Dreyfus for that part. And as much as it sucks that William Hurt died just period, he was a really great actor. He would have made a killer Thunderbolt Ross. Oh, and they were just building to that. But I think she can fill the void very well for the human side of it. It would be intriguing if they made her a Red Hulk down the line too. But I don't know. Do I think that, it's got the Ally McBeal vibe. Of course, they said it was going to be a comedy. They said they were going to follow the Singleton lawyer around. So it lends itself to Ally McBeal anyway. But as I've said in all of the other breakdowns, when they're in a courtroom or when they're dealing with a legal matter, I have to tell you, I do think there's quite a bit of Law and Order in there. I get away with saying that because as a litigator, I've done breakdowns about how every flavor of legal ice cream that they've gone into, from either direct experience for the most part, or I'm not a criminal attorney, I've had plenty of friends who are, so indirectly learning from them and or getting feedback from them, I can tell you that there's a lot of real and true stuff that they're shooting through here. A lot of attention to detail. So it is like Law and Order if it had an Ally McBeal candy coated shell, if that makes sense. In terms of the Thunderbolts, I think I could be wrong. I'm not saying that's a bad observation because they do try to weave things in like a very complicated tapestry in the MCU, which is one of the reasons why I love it. And we've never seen in the history of like filmography anything to the scale that they've done. So kudos to them for that. But the Thunderbolts to me just feel like Val's out there recruiting, and she's not necessarily taking and studying and recruiting like analytically in a lab, but perhaps. Do you guys have any questions? Do you have anything else that you think I missed? But that's a very good question, Mike, especially in terms of, is it Ally McBeal? Is it Law and Order? I do think it's both. Again, I think it's a Law and Order kind of core when it comes to the law itself, with the Ally McBeal comedy candy coated shell to it. I think that they're serving a lot of masters, but they're doing it well. I do think so. And I think that Disney Plus gives them the opportunity to not only do deep dive character pieces, which I think is important to do anyway, because then it makes the stakes even higher when we go into the movies, because then we really know and understand the characters and their motivations more. And or if they're threatened, we care about them more. And so the stakes are higher. We don't want to see them suffer. We don't want to see them die. But let me have another drink. But also it gives them the opportunity to do different types of content on Disney Plus that isn't just superhero movie, so that you get, this is a comedy, this is a coming of age and dealing with, this is a comedy that's a legal comedy. So we kind of can scratch both of those itches simultaneously with She-Hulk. Miss Marvel was kind of like a coming of age, finding my way, negotiating teenage love and hormones, and oh yeah, having to deal with superpowers, and then the cultural issues of being Muslim, and what that does from the outside world looking in, for the history that a lot of Muslims and non-Muslim Indians went through with the partition. I mean, the partition is like, if you weren't in and around India, Pakistan, you might not have even known what the partition was. And I think it's such an important piece of human history to look at and to study and to understand. Not only is that something that we don't want to see executed that way ever again because of the cost of human lives, but also the aftermath and the ripple effect that has affected generations. In and of itself, that's very detailed. And then seeing how that kind of overlay affects a Muslim female character who might be, who is Jinn, and that's something that, her faith directly and indirectly rejects, like that's so much storytelling. And then WandaVision, you're going on a retrospective of all the different types of TV shows and the social mores and the development of family dynamics and marriage dynamics through all of that. What great storytelling. And they're bringing that director back. Isn't he the one that's going to be directing Fantastic Four? Like the MCU version of Fantastic Four, I hope finally works. So that's it. Do you guys have anything else for me? Any questions that you want to ask or anything like that about my first view through reactions? I owe a video or two that I raised last week, but again, this week was kind of busy with attorney work. So I will catch up with those. Going once. Going twice. Make sure that you subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. I will do live stream reactions to She-Hulk and also to Rings of Power. I've been asked by a couple people, some in the comments and some behind the scenes, could you break down Rings of Power? And I would like to. There's a lot of complaining about how they're depicting or showing Galadriel as a character. And I'm going to defend her, not just with the hero's journey, but there's two hero's journeys. There actually are as storytelling concepts. And I think that they are doing a great job of both of those heroes' journeys and why it's so important just in general for the Rings of Power product itself, but also how they really are evolving her up and leveling her up to the Galadriel that we meet in The Lord of the Rings, the Peter Jackson version of The Lord of the Rings. So Mike adds, I know some people can't take that this is a comedy and a lot to say. They don't think it's funny at all. Thank you for understanding what the show is and liking it for what it is. You're welcome. And I know that you feel that way too, Mike. Rami says, I'm all for Galadriel's video. Can't wait. Yep. I will do my belated breakdown and reactions, and I think I'll stylize it as non-Tolkien hero expert because if you're not like this total Tolkien like scholar, some people get freaked out. But you'll get the reactions to the episodes themselves. But I will do that separate character piece for study for Galadriel. Sometimes you get people who are either such super fan of works like the Marvel comics, or the Lord of the Rings, all of Tolkien's work, and they are such purists that they can't be satisfied. But for everybody else who might be a little bit more open-minded, if you're used to the typical superhero pow 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 pew pew pew, you did get some of that in this episode, but still well played to show the complexity of what Titania is going through versus She-Hulk not quite being happy or satisfied about, yeah, I won the fight, but it just doesn't feel good to me. It doesn't feel good to me to watch Titania suffer either, right? Everybody's complicated and sympathetic. If you're just little boy, little girl, young person reading through comic books and your brain can only process pew, 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 pow, 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 then it's going to upset you. Not to say that comedy hasn't been done well in comic books, because look at Deadpool, okay? There was nobody that walked into the Deadpool movie that didn't think that you were going to mix a lot of brutal violence and a lot of pew, 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 pow, pow, pow with comedy. And when I first heard Ryan Reynolds for the part, I was like, oh my God, why? No one could do Deadpool the way Ryan Reynolds can. Nobody. And by the way, I have a video on my channel that if you didn't see, you should see, and it's all about the good, bad, and the ugly of Hugh Jackman ever coming back to play Wolverine again. And I agree, there's plenty of things with the X-Men franchise that were kind of like, ugh. Wolverine was not one of them. Oh my God, Hugh Jackman was Wolverine. But, in the aftermath of the Logan movie, does it ever make sense how the actor himself feels about it? Is it worth it to see him in the multiverse saga as a fun cameo and fan service? Or is even that kind of like not fair given how that character arc played out in the movies? Yes, the non-MCU version of the movies. So give that video some love if you've got some time. I think it's pretty insightful about the good, the bad, and the ugly. And then I'd love to see your comments on it, because I know a lot of people are passionate Wolvie fans. I love Wolverine. I don't think what I said in that video was disrespectful to Mr. Jackman, Wolverine, or both. But I've got my thoughts about him ever doing that part again. And I know, speaking of Ryan Reynolds, he went through a bit of an emotional odyssey too, because he really wanted to have him in some of the work that he did. Kenneth Smith, don't ever bring back Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. You'll want to see my video, Kevin. You will. And I can't wait to see your comments in that video in terms of why. I get your point. I don't want to spoil my argument. I mean, of course, I understand why some people would be for it. And then I talk about why against it. Because even if the actor was like, all right, I'll do it, there comes a point where you just shouldn't. So I don't want to I don't want to spoil that video. Whoever is brought in to like be the Wolverine for MCU, that's got to be somebody a little bit on the younger side, which back in the day, Wolverine was Wolverine. See, synonymous. Hugh Jackman was younger. So was I, so was Mike, so was everybody, you know. and now we're not, and now he's not. And there just comes a certain point where you just can't keep going to that well anymore. Whomever comes in now as Wolverine needs to be able to pull that role off for the next 2 decades. And a lot more goes into that character to sell him, to execute him, and to be comic book accurate than just a uniform. And I think that's just too much to ask somebody to do who doesn't at least have youth on their side. And I'm in the same generation that Hugh Jackman's in, so I'm not being ageist. And I even said that in that video. So you guys go and give that video some love if you like. And my goal is, my video editor is getting married. Speaking of weddings, so he will be off tomorrow. So hopefully the Galadriel video will be a Monday video that he can get that edited. Kenneth Smith says, too old, too tall, and too traditionally attractive. I want a real Wolverine. You know what? I think that that's fair, Kenneth. One thing that folks said when they were a little bit critical of him when he was first introduced in the original X-Men was that he was too tall. And to be honest with you, you may know this, Kenneth, because you seem really knowledgeable about the character as he's shown up in cinema. Hugh Jackman was not, and I didn't go into this in the video, so I'm not spoiling anything here. Hugh Jackman was not the first choice for that character. He really wasn't. He's one of the folks that read well, and they felt that as an actor, he could pull it off in a vacuum, but his height was one of the reasons why they didn't think that he could originally jive with that character. Hey, Trinity, what's going on? Good to see you. Kenneth and everybody else, make sure that you check out Second Street Marvel's live stream reaction party /replay, because he really goes into things. I'm a lawyer. I can give you the lawyer perspective. I'm female, and I can give you the female perspective. He's a really good foil for, like a compare and contrast between both our reactions. In terms of him being too tall, yeah, that was one of the marks against him. The original actor that they wanted for that, for the role of Wolverine, it ended up they couldn't get him off Mission Impossible fast enough. Tom Cruise kept saying, we need him for a little more. We're shooting some more. We're reshooting some more. And they ended up saying, we can't hold this project up anymore. So they went with Hugh Jackman. In terms of him being traditionally attractive, Wolvie kind of is and isn't, but I get what you're saying. He, maybe you feel he's a little bit too pretty boy. I think what they did with the, with the makeup and the character, they tried to blunt that as much as they could. And then Mike says, just a one-off for Secret Wars in a different multiverse. Then they will recast for our universe. Phase 7 will be about mutants and X-Men, in my opinion. I tend to agree with that. I think at best it'll be fan service. I love Hugh Jackman, and man, what he had to do physically to commit for that. He couldn't make himself shorter, but he otherwise had to transform his whole body and gain weight, and where necessary, cut weight to make that work. And that is just extreme in terms of diet, and then dehydrating himself and then bulking up and just, oh my Jesus. he really killed himself for that role. So I understand, and I actually kind of agree with you, Kenneth. That ship has sailed, so I respect your opinion anyway. But my God, yeah, I can't even imagine putting myself through that. Trinity, I missed your shows. Admits Mike. I was about to pop into your watch party. Bernthal would be a great Wolverine. And Rami says absolutely. They do have a couple of really cool candidates. And so far, I think Marvel has been perfect. Marvel Studios has been perfect to near perfect about all their casting choices. So I do have a great layer of trust in terms of whomever they go with for Wolverine and anybody in the X-Men. But like I said, the whole Doctor Doom thing, I don't think we're going to see an actor's face. We're going to have the mask. We're going to have the garb. But you're not going to be truly introduced to Doctor Doom more than conceptually after you get out of Wakanda Forever. But they are laying down those tracks, which it's about time. Leslie Jones for Wolverine, like Trinity. Oh my God. Kenneth Smith says Tom Cruise and Mission Impossible seem to just need to mess up a lot of comic book movies. Justice League, anyone. Speaking of Tom Cruise, you guys let me know in the comments down below. Live and on the replay, all your comments are important. I wish that all of the comments during my live would show up on the replay. I check off that option and it doesn't. I don't check off the option to experiment. It certainly doesn't. It pisses me off. But I try to read all of them aloud to give everybody their credit and their acknowledgement while they're here live. Mike Bernthal is the understudy for for Leslie Jones. Holy crap, Leslie Jones. I'd love to see her in the MCU because I'd love to see her in anything. She just is awesome and sells it. It's amazing. But Tom Cruise, I kind of was a little bit disappointed because you had all the rumors and perhaps the potential plans for him to show up as as a version of Iron Man, and I think he would have pulled that off. Okay, I really do. But of course, Mission Impossible allegedly, again, obviously another, movie in that franchise screwed that up. I also think his dance card's going to be kind of full because the whole Top Gun thing, okay, you had the Maverick movie, which made billions of dollars worldwide, is one of the hugest movies ever out. They've not been secret about the fact that that's supposed to be a franchise. And so he's going to be director-wise, actor-wise, all sorts of things, really committed to that franchise. And I don't think his commitment has waned any since the huge commercial success of, Top Gun / Maverick. So I don't really know. I know that the Iron Man character has to come back. That's a decently performing video on my channel. But I make the argument, as much as we all love RDJ, I think he's done for a variety of reasons too. And I don't think he's being coy about it. I think just personally, as well as the physical drains of that character on him, that's a younger man's game. And again, he's in my generation, I do believe, as much as I know Tom Cruise is in my generation, as much as I know Hugh Jackman is in my generation. So, there comes a certain point in time where we need to let the younger folk come in, I think, at least for certain characters. But I would have liked to have seen him as part of the Illuminati in Doctor Strange and in the Multiverse of Madness. So I'm sad about that potential missed opportunity. Kenneth Smith agrees Tom Cruise would be an excellent Sebastian Shaw. Yeah, he even has the Pittsburgh accent. And yes, Sebastian Shaw is a physical character, as most superhumans are, but I think he could pull that off. You're not dealing with a ton of armor, and Sebastian Shaw is somebody that can go in and out of movies and in and out of plots, but the whole thing doesn't have to revolve around him the way the whole thing would have to revolve around Iron Man, or the whole thing would have to revolve around Wolverine, or really involve those characters and not be an in and out for a movie or a plot or a Disney Plus series. And then we park that character in the back. So yeah, I think Sebastian Shaw would be really good from the Hellfire Club. That'd be cool. Oh my gosh, there's just so much storytelling to do before we even go to Krakoa. Oh my goodness. So let's see. What else? Did I leave any open loops during this live stream? Again, as a lawyer, I love what they're doing with the law. Ally McBeal, I mean, I don't know. I didn't watch a lot of TV because I was working my way through law school, and then the first 5 years of being a lawyer is hell. There are no such things as in-office days. You're working every weekend, FaceTime in the office. I mean, in a post-pandemic world, there's a lot of virtual going on now that certainly wasn't going on before. But my goodness gracious, like, so I didn't really watch Ally McBeal because I didn't watch a lot of TV because I did not have the time. My apartment at that time, I had an apartment. It was just a box to hold me and my stuff, and that's it. And me just sleeping. But I really do think that putting the comedy aside, the law stuff and the law office dynamics are real. And yes, a singleton or a single woman's dynamics are real. I'm wondering if they cut some of the post-credit scenes because, again, if she was factoring into Wakanda Forever, Coogler's redoing some of that even now. So that might have kicked out one of the post-credit scenes. And then whatever they're doing with Hulk, maybe the Sakaar stuff, they've had to not give us more direct teases. That could be. I'm kind of a little sore because I was like, ooh, I love post-credit scenes. I do, even when you get like the occasional troll one. But I think they're reshuffling some decks in the background for long-term planning. And, they got a lot going on. All right, so I've been hanging out with y'all for about 2 hours. Make sure you catch Second Street Marvel, Trinity's channel, because I love that too. And I'm going to go and let's see. I have a half an hour to prep until the other work day starts. So I will talk to you guys later. Bye.